G'day Lou, how are you?
Really good, Nick. Really good. Just back from a bit of a break, so feeling very refreshed.
Well earned.
Yeah. After the pandemic and 4 years worth of absolute micro engagement, I really needed it. It's my first break for the last 5 years, so it was great. It was great to reconnect with the kids and my wife as well. It was excellent.
Yeah, nice. So I did want to start off by maybe just a bit of an introduction about who is Lou Pascuzzi, and I'm sure there's a lot to that, but I guess everyone listening to this is not necessarily familiar with who you are. A lot probably are, but I think some background to that would be really good. So, who is Lou Pascuzzi, and how did you end up here at TLC?
I grew up in the northern suburbs for half my life, where all good Italian families migrated to, and loved the northern suburbs, but was always in family beach outings at Black Rock, and I just loved the Bayside suburbs, and I really aspired to one day get there. And when I got married, my wife had an affinity with that side of town as well, so we moved to Bayside, and we've been there ever since. My career started motivated pretty much by my father. My father was an accountant by trade, and he always ran his own business, as did his father, my grandfather as well. So fresh out of my commerce degree, and then post-grad in business statistics and analytics. I worked for Australia Post in some graduate placements in market and business analytics. Met a really charming fellow while I was there, and we started our own corporate health business, and that was really the start of my entry into health.
Yep.
And we grew that business over 13 years to become the largest in Australia and New Zealand. One of our biggest clients was Bupa.
Yep.
And we came to a renegotiation of our contract with Bupa, and they walked into our boardroom and said, "We're not re-signing, we want to buy you out." So again, Dad is the mentor. I said, "Look, what do you think?" He said, "Lou, never get attached to an asset. You've got your degrees and graduate diplomas." He said, "Move on, take the winnings and move on." I always thought that I wouldn't be employable after that, because ultimately you don't really get corporates employing entrepreneurs that have run their own businesses to a certain level of fruition, because they're difficult to control. But I was keen to get back into corporate, and anyway, word got around that I'd sold the business, and the CEO at the time of Healthscope, Robert Cook, gave me a call, and I had to cut my overseas trip short because he asked me to come over and manage his the medical centre business for Healthscope, because again, in the business that I ran, we operated a couple of on-site medical centres at different construction companies and mining firms. So I very quickly moved back into corporate as a national manager for medical centres for Healthscope, running 72 medical centres and looking after the best part of 500-600 GPs. Ran that right through to when TPG and Carlyle, the private equity firm that owned Healthscope at the time, floated the business, and exited on float, and went over to Sonic Healthcare under the auspices of Colin Goldschmidt and Malcolm Parmenter, big names in the healthcare industry, and helped Malcolm Parmenter run their medical centre business. Within about a year of that, I received a phone call from C-Centric Executive Recruiters, and he said, "Look, Lou, I know you're primary care through and through, medical centres through and through, but he said there's a particular company that's interested in your CV, but it's in aged care." And I said, "Look, I know nothing about aged care. And also I'd heard nothing but negative reports coming out of aged care, and I always swore it to be an industry that I'd never touch. Acute and primary care was my game. but I did a little bit of investigation and found a lot of low-hanging fruit. So I decided, oh, well, look, I'll go and entertain this business, and it happened to be TLC. After some discussion around my coming on and as CEO and some of the ideas I had for the industry, and the fact that the board at the time were supportive of those ideas. They actually liked what they heard. It was refreshing because they'd always had CEOs from the industry, and the business sort of plateaued and became a little stale. They were quite happy to hear some innovative initiatives coming from someone. And that was the end of that. From that point on, in 2013, I took over the realm here, and it's a very different business to what it was back then. We've changed the operational model significantly, which is really why we're in a better position today, a decade later, than what a lot of the other aged care providers are in. And it's been a lot of fun because the ultimate beneficiaries of a lot of the initiatives that we've introduced has been our residents and the other clientele that we've developed over that time, being our patients of our medical centres, our students of our registered training organisation. These are all new initiatives that we are concentrically diversified into. Now our children in our first early learning centre that we've opened, and our gym members in the first commercial health club that we've opened as well. So it's been a very exciting decade with a significant level of achievements, and I've committed to the next decade only because the board is not retarding any of the new initiatives that we've planned for the next decade as well. So it's an exciting place to work, and I'm enjoying myself, and just recently been made a director as well, so I'm very much enjoying myself.
Yeah, congratulations. It's there's a lot in that. There's a lot in that answer, and I think how much of one of the things I guess I want to unpack there is that what you've been able to achieve with TLC, being in aged care, what translated for you from what you learned in terms of building and running your own business to then working back in corporate to then coming into TLC in corporate and now being a director? Was there a lot that translated between those industries?
Look, running your own business gives you an appreciation for every one of the corporate functions because basically you're involved in all of them, especially in the company's inception when you're running your own business. So, you know, HR, IT, finance, quality, governance, and so on and so forth. And the fact that I had that broader knowledge, so I was, jack of all trades, master of none, in a functional corporate sense, I think I earned a lot of respect from the other executives that looked after the other functions at Healthscope, because I had an appreciation of what they did, but also had how they would impact my business, i.e. Healthscope, the medical centre business, how they would support that, and similarly at Sonic as well, and here as well. Here we had it was still very much a family business. The industry when I moved into aged care was very much a cottage industry. So we pretty much corporatised it over the last decade. That was one of my initiatives to corporatise it. To bring in a full range of C-suites and so on, which we didn't have before. But the fact that I had appreciation for the functions that literally run a business, I think I was able to utilise those functions in a better way to benefit whatever I was looking after, whether it was the medical centre business or at Healthscope, Sonic, or here. Whatever I was looking after, I think I was able to utilise the functions to support the business and indeed bottom line better. And not only that, whenever I was in dialogue with those functions, it would be an informed dialogue, because they'd look at me and think, okay, well, at least he knows what he's talking about. He's he's not just an accountant, or he's not just a a clinical person that knows their bit but doesn't really understand how it interconnects with the other functions to get the best result. So ultimately for me, I think that was the biggest benefit, that experience that I gained in all of the functions, in setting up all of the functions when I ran my own business.
Yeah, and being able to bring those into, because I think it's fair to say, one of the sayings I've said, and maybe it's unfair, maybe it's fair, but aged care by name, aged care by nature, and sometimes it's been very slow to adapt.
Absolutely.
And so that skill set and that experience in a fast-paced environment, you've brought that into TLC, and you've implemented those principles and made a huge success out of that.
Absolutely, and look, looking at the company now, a lot of that gets forgotten. But for people who've got very short memories.
Yeah.
But it was very embryonic in that realm 10 years ago, and we've developed it to a point now in the last decade where it pretty much resembles a large corporate business, and the governance element as well has been enhanced as well. So I think that would have to be heralded as one of the success factors of the last decade, and also in our being able to navigate in a collaborative form with the expertise that we've brought on and now that we have that's static to the organisation. Our ability to navigate so well the challenges of the last decade, of which, as you know, there've been many.
So would you describe yourself as divergent, do you think, in the industry? Do you think you're a bit of a divergent?
Look, I am. We are pretty much disruptors in the industry as far as I'm concerned, and we are divergent in that, and I've been very critical of the industry, where, and not to be mean, but I'm just calling it as it is. And surely, I believe anyway, the industry understands this. The fact that the majority of the industry, 80–90% of it, is still running operations and the industry itself the same way it's been running for 40–50 years. The model doesn't work, nor does it meet new expectations of an evolving market requiring the services of aged care, and in particular residential aged care or home care or whatever the case may be. And to not change, I think, is a little arrogant. And for your only strategy to be putting your hand down and lobbying government for more money for a system or an operational model that is fundamentally flawed, really. If we weren't 80% funded by the government, if you were a business in another industry that was totally reliant on customers and customer attrition and so on, and so, you'd fail. You would fail. If you didn't change and evolve with the industry, you would fail. And I think now even governments are starting to realise, how much more money can we give this industry? How much more can we afford? And now they're looking for other sources. So again, in user pays and changing the means testing rules, and they're entertaining levies from superannuation funds and or an income tax levy. Perish the thought. But that's just adding more or supporting an industry that just doesn't want to change. It supports that ideology. And as far as I'm concerned, the industry will never have enough money if it keeps running the way it is. And that's where, in the first year, and even at my interview 10 years ago, I said, we can't keep running this business the way it's running, because we could see the headwinds, or not all of them, but a lot of them. I mean, who would have known a pandemic would have hit us? But we could see a lot of the headwinds, and we could see that the model was just unsustainable. So we thought that, again, we must diversify. We must look for new revenue opportunities, but not diversify for the sake of diversification. We wanted to diversify concentrically so that whatever we were diversifying into was going to benefit the core product, being residential aged care.
Complementary.
It was going to be complementary to that product, and that's why, medical centres and bringing doctors onto rack sites and moving. Again, there was a shortage of doctors at that time. Doctors did not want to visit residential aged care homes. They weren't funded to do so. There was an opportunity cost for them leaving their domiciled medical centre to attend an aged care home. And that was a big problem because aged care residents need primary care. So I thought, okay, well, bringing the doctors to them by opening community medical centres, co-located community medical centres at every one of our sites was a big winner. And the biggest winner was the resident who was getting primary care on tap. And that evolved then to include allied health. And then we thought, we talk about workforce shortages now. The industry's had workforce shortages for the last 10, 15 years. So we thought, okay, well, we're going to need to train our own, and that's where the concept of of introducing our own registered training organisation was born. So again, to benefit the aged care, and we've started training our own people in Cert 3s and Cert 4s and diplomas for the last 6 or 7 years, and that's helped bolster our workforce shortage issues as well. And then just recently, with intergenerational care and our will to deinstitutionalise aged care, that's when the early learning centres, the childcare centres and the health clubs have come in. And they have provided great revenue streams into TLC, provide a sustainable platform that we can grow on into the future, but also benefit the original customer, which is the resident.
So it's this diversification that has set you apart, do you think? So we hear all these reports about 75% of the industry is running at a loss.
Yep.
I read this morning as well that Victoria's had 300 beds stripped out of circulation in the last 18 months. We still have this ageing tsunami coming that we've got to deal with. These are not new problems, right? I mean, you just say we've had staff shortages for as long as you've been in the industry.
Yep.
So what's the difference? Is it that diversification? What's TLC doing differently to the majority of the other providers?
Absolutely, it's the diversification. The other thing we did was really look at the business operations and looked at where we could find improvement in efficiencies in those aspects as well. But before I go into that, yes. The latest Stuart Brown report identifies 72% of the industry operating at a loss. Yes, recent media this morning, 300 beds stripped from the industry, but those 300 beds are being stripped from the industry resultant of providers selling vacant possessions, homes that are vacant. Yep. And selling to non-aged care providers. So basically a lot of those homes are being turned into rehab centres, or indeed demolished and used for townhouse development or whatever the case may be. But there are 300 residential aged care homes, going concerns, on the market at the moment for sale. And 73 of those, Estias, apparently they've just settled today. So Bain & Co. today have now, will take Estia off the publicly listed market as a listed operator. And over the last decade, we've seen 3 listed operators now reduced to 1. And if that doesn't tell you there's something fundamentally wrong with the industry, because both those listed providers, compared to when they floated, running their homes at 17% EBITDA per place, they're recently on sale, Chapara to Calvary and now Estia to Bain, had reduced to $4,000 or $5,000 per place. Now, if that doesn't tell you that there's something wrong with the industry, if a scale provider can't operate a status quo operational model that's been running for 40 years, that should be enough to tell you that the industry doesn't need more money. The industry operational model needs to change. To go back to your question, that's why TLC hasn't had the issues it's had. Hasn't had the issues the other providers have had over the last decade. It's because of our gradual diversification. But the other thing we looked at is, for example, especially over the last 5 years with regard to the pandemic, mid-tier consumable suppliers have been profiteering